we're going to talk about some of Florida Gators' top 2025 recruiting targets here on Locked On Gators.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. Happy Wednesday. I'm Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Giants Country and NFL 33. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app. Create an account and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. And joining me now is going to be Brian Smith, Locked On's Recruiting Insider. Joining me now for Locked On Gators is Brian Smith, Locked On's Recruiting Insider. And before we talk 2025, kids, LinkedIn is the college recruiting sponsor across the Locked On Podcast Network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions do apply. And Brian, we're going to start by talking about DJ Pickett today, just because we've talked about him probably more than any other 2025 kid that we've actually talked about, because we've gone through him a few times here, and he is the elite of the elite. Yesterday on Locked On Gators, I talked about how Florida has not been able to bring in that elite defensive back. Since Jason Marshall, Florida hasn't brought in the top defensive back in the state, and it's very frustrating. But how do you feel about DJ Pickett and his potential for the Florida Gators?
I think that is the holding pattern. I was actually texting with his dad earlier, like his last two visits were LSU and Oregon. He is all over the map, checking out everything, making sure no rock is unturned. But I mean, he lives about an hour and 40 minutes from Gainesville, from his house. So really shouldn't be that hard for them to get him on campus. But then again, I'm not sure when that's supposed to happen, if it is, what the communication's like, because it's a new staff. That's a kid, though, that if you don't at least get him on campus a couple of times between now and the end of the summer, official, unofficial, whatever combination there might be, that's a bad sign. That's a kid that has been to Florida before, and I know there's been turnover with the staff, DB coaches change, etc. But I mean, you're State U, and you're right down the road in Tampa, where he basically lives. He lives in Zephyr Hills. It's right on the edge of Tampa. Those are the kinds of kids you got to get on campus and have an opportunity with. So, and there's playing time available, because last year's secondary, while talented, didn't prove anything. So I'm skeptical of this year's group until otherwise proven. I'm sure you are as well. Matter of fact, I know you are. And there's no way you can't just recruit him as hard as possible. As I've told you before, when he was 6'1" and an eighth grader, he was locking down kids in the Tampa area, and I would have taken him as an eighth grader. Flat out. As crazy as that is, he's as rare physically as any DB I've ever scouted. Now he's 6'3.5" and still playing corner. The last tournament battle that I saw him at, and I even told him before the game, and he knew it was going to happen, they won't throw at him. I can't get any film of him. I got one clip. He played an offensive play and scored a touchdown. It's the one clip I got. They will not throw to his side of the field. So another game one of my buddies did, same thing. Got 0 clips. There's a reason that he's as rare as he is. That quarterbacks avoid him like the plague.
Yeah, with his, like you said so frequently, rare size and skill set. Long term, he's listed on some recruiting sites as a safety, some as a corner. I'm going to assume Florida's recruiting him at corner because, I mean, you recruit a guy for the most valuable position you can get him at, and if that doesn't work, then move him. But where do you think he's better suited long term?
I would say free safety if you have big-time corners, because his break on the ball for a long kid is sickening. He reminds me a little bit of Kyle Hamilton, if that tells you anything, what kind of speed. I mean, he's obviously pretty good. So there are different kinds of personalities. DJ doesn't say boo. He'll hand the ball to the ref, walk off the field, but that's after he scores or picks it off. Who cares what he says? He just makes plays. He can play about any position skill-wise outside of running back. He's a little too long for that. But I would just take him and let it kind of roam into whatever it needs to be, because he could play in the slot over a big tight end that's a flex guy. If that's the person that's eating you up, he's good with that too. He's got tremendous ball skills, anticipation, and I call him the spider because his arms are so long. It's just absurd. And I mean, I've known him since 8th grade, but he's darn near 6'4" now. That's just rarefied air for a corner, man.
And you mentioned earlier with Florida having the new staff and how recruiting is going to be for them with someone like DJ Pickett specifically. And you have Will Harris coming in after Corey Raymond left. And Corey Raymond, of course, one of the best reputations of a defensive back coach I think you can talk about when it comes to college football. How does that play into his recruiting, where you got the reputation of Corey Raymond and the resume of Corey Raymond, but also last year and even the year prior, cornerback specifically was just awful in Gainesville. And now you've got Will Harris, who, while he's been out of college for a couple of years,
right,
his resume and his reputation, obviously not nearly as good as Corey Raymond, but still his resume is pretty good. He's got an all-pro, all-American, first-round pick corners and DBs at Washington. Now he's in charge for Florida. So what is the trade-off there of not having, as we'll say, thick a resume, but also recency bias? Corey Raymond was terrible in Gainesville.
I think it's just a matter of whether or not they hit it off. Obviously, Harris is going to recruit DJ Pickett or any other top corner in the South. It's Florida. You can open those doors pretty quickly. I don't know what it's going to be. Yeah, like I said, DJ's a pretty quiet kid. It's hard to read him. I've known him for a long time, and it's still hard to read him. You just got to recruit him until he gets a restraining order on you, pretty much. I mean, you're just not going to find guys like him. He's going to work out at some spot. It's just a matter of where it's going to be. I would imagine they're making every effort to do so. Why would you not? I don't see any other obstacle, really. It's just relationship. But that is the key. As I've said a gazillion times on this show, kids pick the school based on the coach wearing the polo that says Florida. Not, I know fans hate this. It's the way it is. They're going to pick the coach. Happens all the time. Look at the kids that transferred to Alabama from Washington, or the recruits that looked at them, et cetera. It's the coach. And look at the guys that left Alabama because Saban left too. It's the coach. It is what it is. So the next 2 months are really important for Florida. If DJ does not visit for a spring practice, that's not great. You know what I mean? You have to at least get him on campus for a practice, right? You know, a Saturday scrimmage or something like that where it's easy. If not, then it's just probably not going to happen.
Yeah, and I know that this is kind of an impossible question to ask of you, but you mentioned a couple of times, getting him on campus in the next 2 months during spring practice, getting him on campus a few times by the end of the summer. What do you think DJ Pickett's commitment timeline is? Like, do you think this is going to be one where it really goes down to, obviously, every recruitment goes down to the wire in 2024, but do you think it's one that's going to go down to the wire before we even get a commitment, or is it going to be just summer kid?
I'll put it to you like this. If you call me and I'm standing next to DJ 5 minutes before he commits and I say, where are you going? And he tells me, I'll say there's a 50-50 chance that's where he's going, because he has that many schools after him hard. Yeah, that's nothing against DJ. It's just, it's hard to tell 50 schools no. Literally. The only school that hasn't offered him is Notre Dame. And that's it. Like every other school, major Power 5 has offered him. It's insane. So I don't know where he's going to go. I don't know what his visit schedule is. I know a couple months ago he dropped that top 5 or whatever. That mean I have no interest in that. I don't even know what it is. I care less, because coaches change all the time, and because all the circumstances with players leaving. Like, look at it this way. Alabama just lost their top 2 corners of the draft early. Do you think Alabama is going to come after him hard? I mean, that's rough, but that's part of it. Who is it going to be this next year that turns pro early that surprises, and they can say, look, man, you come in here and start? Could be Georgia. It's hard to say. So Florida will be in the mix, but watch the next couple of months, because if the Gators don't get him on campus, they're probably diving off a cliff on the DJ Pickett train.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure both Michigan and Alabama were in that top 5 that he put, and obviously they both have, they both had quite a few changes there on their coaching staff. GameTime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. And right now, all users can get $100 off when they buy a big game ticket this Sunday with code VEGAS100. With killer last minute deals, all in prices, view from your seats, and the best price guarantee, GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And I will say, they have some things that are called zone deals that are absolutely sick. It's basically there's a section that you buy and it's like a mystery seat type thing, and you get to go buy tickets, get a great seat. I got to see the Nets play the other day, which I'm not a Nets fan, but it was a good deal, and I got great ticket, genuinely great tickets for much cheaper than they would have cost. So big fan of the zone deals, and Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after it starts in some events. It's the place to find last minute seats. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Right now, all Game Time users get $100 off a big game ticket with code VEGAS100. Terms do apply. Just download the Game Time app. Use code VEGAS100 for $100 off a big game ticket. Or if you're not going to the big game, use code LOCKED ON for $20 off your first purchase. Flipping to the offensive side and talking about flip candidates like we do so frequently here. Tight end Elias Williams, Georgia commit, number one tight end in the country. What do you think Florida's got to do to try and flip him? Because Florida's tight ends obviously haven't been Brock Bowers caliber. They haven't been Jatavian Sanders either. But you look at Hayden Hansen as the inline blocking tight end, played that well, played it frequently, got a ton of snaps there. You look at Arliss Boardingham, who he kind of found his role throughout the year of being that really glorified power slot tight end there. But when you're looking at recruiting someone like Elias Williams and you're competing with Georgia, of all places in recent years especially, how does Florida kind of sell this?
You could be that guy because that piece, I mean, you and I talked about this. The one thing Napier has done, and I'm not sure why he hasn't gotten more credit for this, is set up for their staff to go after a bunch of speedy receivers. It reminds me of Spurrier circa 1995. They had a bunch of guys that nobody could stay in front of. Well, that's what Florida did. They've got basically a track team at wide receiver right now. And that's a lot of fun to watch. And then you add a 6'5", 6'6", 6'7" kid, whatever, who's a receiver listed as a tight end. He's a receiver. I don't care what his height, weight is. The way he plays, you watch his film, you're like, this is not fair. Like he plays in Nowheresville, Georgia, just murdering poor children that have mothers in the stand. And, that film's going on YouTube. That's just a kid you can't guard at the high school level. And I really don't think a lot of guys at the college level will either, because when he's flexed out, a 6'2" safety is still going to be 3 to 5 inches. I don't know how tall he really is. He's listed at 6'7" by some people. They're not going to guard him. So I'm not going to say he's Kyle Pitts, but at the same time, he's in that style, and he's a little bit thicker at this stage, a little stronger. Man, his upside is through the roof. Your point about Brock is true, but Kyle wasn't that long ago either. So, and he's my all-time favorite tight end to watch in college football because he wasn't a tight end. He was a receiver. And I think that's what this kid is too. Elias is a special talent. It's not good for college football if he goes to Georgia for the obvious reasons. They don't need those extra kind of weapons. So I hope he goes to Florida, but that's just me. And to be honest with you, I'm looking forward to seeing him in just over a week at the Under Armour event up in Atlanta, because there's nobody to guard him there either.
Yeah. I think there's nobody watching the show anymore because I think they all just dropped dead when you said that you hope he went to Florida. Because if you ask them, they swear you hate Florida. So I think that everybody watching just dropped dead when they heard you say that. But looking at, I don't get it. Looking at Elias Williams, I'm going to keep screwing that one up for a bit. But he's listed as 6'7", 235, which you mentioned. Like, even if they're kind of inflating that height a little bit, that's still like 6'5" at the absolute worst. So it's just,
how many 6'5" DBs do you know, Brandon? I don't know any. Okay.
Yeah, no, not a single one. And definitely not a good one.
Exactly.
Looking at what he can bring to the table, Florida also just brought in Napier Jackson in their 2024 class. So when you're looking at positional versatility and just getting speed on the field at every spot. How do they kind of pair in? Because Florida does like to have a tight end in blocking. And, well, Amir Jackson was running end arounds in high school, and Elias Williams is listed as 6'7", 235, runs like a receiver. So how do you kind of look at Amir Jackson and Elias Williams maybe playing together?
I would run a lot of personnel that's 12 and put a couple of those speedy receivers out there, one running back. And then if you go no huddle, maybe you shift one, like depending on what you're trying to do, you may go slow and go a couple shifts, try to get a poor corner lined up with Williams. Good luck. A poor corner lined up with Jackson to the boundary. He's, 220 pounds or whatever. Those kinds of matchups, worst case scenario, you're throwing jump balls to a guy that has the physical advantage. And they're also going to be physically gifted enough to block in space. If you give some of the little speedy receivers that are at Florida, I don't even pick one, I don't even care. If you execute it properly from the pass and the route being run, the depth and all that, it just takes one guy to get a quality block. And then you got one safety, one-on-one with a guy that runs 4-4 and is twitchy. It's not a complex offense, but that's pretty much what Urban ran. That's pretty much the kind of stuff Spurrier ran. They got a combined 3 rings, and I don't even know how many SEC titles out of doing that. Don't overthink it. You can make teams really be at a disadvantage with your personnel package. 22 and 12, you don't think of like up tempo, but Amir Jackson and certainly those aren't normal tight ends either. They're flex. They are basketball type players playing football. They can take it off your head, or they can help you and just run a basic X screen where they cross and guys one blocks and one gets the ball. It's really generic. But again, one guy to make miss if he gets a good block. And if you want to throw it to him, how many guys are going to guard him? I think they can do whatever they want with those guys.
And another player that Florida is trying to flip from a rival is edge Javen Hilson, who was an Alabama commit, flipped to Florida State.
Correct.
Was supposed to be on campus in Gainesville this weekend, and instead, Florida State.
That is correct.
Yeah. Fun stuff for the Florida Gators there against for Javen Hilson. But how much does that really, do you think, impact their pursuit of him? Because it's like, hey, he was scheduled to come to Florida and instead went to the place that he's currently committed that also happens to be a huge rival of yours.
Well, I mean, I interviewed him face to face, and he told me he was going to go visit. Maybe he took a midweek visit, and I don't know about it, but they put all their pictures on Twitter or X, whatever you call it, and he put Florida State photos up. So I'm going with he did make that visit. He was pretty up for the visit. He was curious. I'm sure Florida State didn't want him to take it, obviously. Maybe they saw that I posted that, and they were like, wait a minute. That wouldn't surprise me. The point is still the same. The kid's pretty open-minded, but he loves how Florida State's recruiting him. He's got a great relationship with their staff. He told me, that was basically the reason he committed. Shocker. It's a relationship thing. That doesn't mean Florida's going to stop. Yeah, I know. I know you're shocked too. He's from Cocoa. And for those of you who don't know the state, that's just due east of Orlando, right on the coast. It's maybe 2 hours from Gainesville, depending on the route. I don't know. Look, that's a school. That's an area that is very UF heavy. They're going to keep going after him. His teammates committed to Ohio State. He's got another teammate that's committed to UCLA or whatever. I mean, that school is loaded. They won state last year. They got an underclassman quarterback that has offers from schools all over the country. You're going to recruit the heck out of that. If Florida goes over for that, we're going to do an entire show on how the Florida staff screwed up recruiting Cocoa, okay? Because there's all kinds of players there. If they get none of them, that's sad. I don't care who the coach is. They have to get those kind of kids. He's a pure edge, pass rusher. I saw him. He was competing with California Power. It's a 7-on-7 team that Pickett plays for, but they also have a 5-on-5 team that's loaded, Myron Charles, et cetera, and he was murdering people. Hilson is way too athletic and way too strong and way too motivated. That's the kind of kid you want on your team. So I was told by one of the guys that covers him that when there's other things going on in town, he goes and works out by himself on Friday nights. He's cut a little different. So in the last year or so, he's taken that jump, and it's just way different. And he's proven it. His offer list, Alabama in particular, when Saban was still there, kind of a sign. So, yeah, that's a kid. If you're Florida, you have to find a way to get him at least on campus a couple times, just like Pickett.
Yeah, for Hilson, I can tell you now, this one's going to come down to signing day before we even have
Oh,
an
sure.
actual moderate answer, because looking at his timeline, committed to Alabama in December. Nick Saban retired. He flipped to Florida State. He was in Gainesville for the Tennessee game, which was, if you're a defender and you're looking at what Florida did to Tennessee's offense in the beginning of the 2023 season, it was impressive as hell. Like, there's just no other way to put it. What Austin Armstrong did, that was his best coach game of the season. Javen Hilson was there. And afterwards, he said that Florida was near the top of his recruitment. So if you're Florida, how do you sell him? Like how do you sell Javen Hilson on, hey, we know that, especially like with this coming down to the wire, you have to think that's kind of an advantage for anybody that's not Florida State. As far as any bad Florida State news, they're just gonna be like, hey, like you want to go there?
Well, there's truth in that. And there's also Florida State turnaround saying, well, look at what Florida's going through in this season. I don't anticipate it going well, but everybody's got negatives. It comes down to those people that are doing the recruitment more than what the recruitment's about. If your parents or your family, your coach, whatever, if they're comfortable with Napier and the staff, then you got a chance. If they're not, you're probably not. Hilson's an easygoing kid, but he's going to have people around him that are going to be influential, whoever they may be. I can just about guarantee his coach is one. He's one of the better coaches in the South. They need to win all those battles around him to kind of flip him, and that would be for anybody, not just UF. But it's going to take something to get him to sign with somebody different, not named Florida State. He really likes them, but that doesn't mean that he didn't want to see UF. And I'll be surprised if he's not on campus at some point this spring. Again, it's only a couple hours. So UF needs to find a way to get into Cocoa, and some of those schools through there anyway. There's a lot of talent on the Space Coast. That just happens to be the best player.
Happy Super Bowl week to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And if you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. Fastest ball carrier, like I mentioned yesterday or the day before, is just absolutely sick. Like, having a fastest ball carrier prop is amazing. I love it. I still haven't decided who I'm going to bet on. I'm leaning towards Rashee Rice. I feel like he gets the best catch and run opportunities, so he might be the one that we talk about there. I'm not doing the kick return stuff. Too many touchbacks, and you got to wait till you're in open space. I'm just saying, new customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Yeah, and the last player that we're going to talk about today is Caleb Cunningham, wide receiver, #2 receiver in the country, according to On3 at least. Released a top 12 last week. It's Alabama, Auburn, Florida, Florida State, Georgia, Georgia Tech, LSU, Mississippi State, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, South Carolina, and Tennessee. Pretty elite company to be in there. What is your opinion of Caleb Cunningham? Because he's someone that we haven't talked about to this point.
He is a kid from, I think it's Choctaw County or whatever it is. It's
Yes, sir.
Nowheresville, Mississippi, typical of that state. It's an incredible per capita state, top 10 in the nation every year for producing National Football League talent. His highlight film, if you just like football in general, go ahead and look up Caleb Cunningham. And I hope that you don't have any friends that play on the teams that he's going against. They throw a lot of jump balls to him and stuff. And he's the kid that, like, you throw alley-oops to on a back screen. And he takes it and he cocks it back before he dunks it just because he can. His leaping ability and his hand-eye coordination are nasty. He plays in a similar fashion to Jeremiah Smith. He's just not as thick. Like, Jeremiah was 210 last year. This kid's about 6'2", I'd say 190, 185, and he runs by everybody. And if it's a short ball, it's worse for the DB because then you get YouTubed. Then he just jumps over you. So it was pretty bad. I'm curious to see him at one of these camps, rivals, or whatever it is, because I want to see him go up against some other Power 5 kids. He's murdering the state of Mississippi, but they're on a ton of elite corners he's going up against. Nobody keeps up with him, though. He's the kind of guy you could put at center field in baseball, track, whatever. Even if he had never caught a pass, you just watch this kid run. You're like, we'll figure it out. We'll take that kid. I don't know where he's going to go, but Florida's had him on campus, I believe, multiple times. Look, I don't know what Billy's got going on in Mississippi, but they've had success getting a bunch of kids over the last couple of years on campus. The running back they got last year from Mississippi is one of the best running backs in the country. That's off a terrible season. They have to have deep roots in that state. Florida should not be counted out because, why would he be visiting now if they didn't have interest? There's no reason. He can go wherever he wants. He can pick up the phone and call anybody in the country. He is an elite player.
Yeah, Florida also had Jamon Waller for quite some time out of Mississippi.
We're
not going to talk about how that ended, but they got him at one point. They had him. For Florida, how do you kind of look at this recruitment and selling Florida to Caleb Cunningham, or at least the job that they've done so far? Because this was his third time on campus this weekend for Junior Day. He said he's coming back. Brought his family, brought his girlfriend this time. He met Billy Gonzalez, or talked to Billy Gonzalez more, talked to Billy Napier, said he can thrive in the offense, said that he loved meeting Billy G. They've been raving about Coach Decker, David Decker, the analyst with wide receivers, who is awesome. By all accounts of anybody I've ever heard, he's awesome. So when you look at Caleb Cunningham, how do you sell him, especially when I understand you get to go, well, Florida, they don't have that 6'3", 190 receiver that can do that. But at the same time, Florida hasn't succeeded in recruiting any of those 6'3", 190 receivers.
I think that's exactly what I was going to say. You can be, although you're still a speed guy and he can run screens and all that, if you play him at boundary and then you slide your coverage to all these little speedy guys, he's 1-on-1. I'm telling you right now, there aren't many teams that want to be in that situation. But offenses have the advantage. And I don't know how much Billy wants to go up tempo. I don't think that's his idea. But if you get another big-time guy, it'd be hard. Elias, you get Cunningham, somebody like that. You can play boundary, flex type, whatever, a bigger guy. It changes your offensive identity because you can get out of those 3rd and 7s just with we don't have a play call here, but we're going to throw it to that guy over there, and you're screwed because you don't have a guy to do anything about it. We're going to put him at boundary. You can't really double him over there. Good luck. You better have an NFL corner. Now, some of those teams in the SEC have that, but there's only 2 or 3 of them. They're really on that level. Everybody thinks they are, but there's only so many Kool-Aid McKinstries around college football. I would imagine that Florida's offense would change immensely. Again, it only takes one guy really to change what you're doing. You could be a 5-win team and quickly be a 9-win team. Think about what Kyle Pitts did for UF in 2020. Let's say he'd have sprained his ankle in week 1. How many games did they win? Like if he'd had a high ankle sprain and missed the first 6 weeks, that changes your entire season. You have a guy like that nobody can cover, and then you have to change your defensive look. That's why certain recruits, even though they're all like a 4-star is a 4-star, and they're really not. A 5-star is a 5-star, they're really not. I'll take the 5-star elite receiver over the offensive guard every time, okay? I'm not picking on anybody, but there's certain positions it's just different. Florida would be in a totally different situation going into this year if they had a big-bodied receiver and or tight end that you knew that was going to consistently hit big plays. Maybe they develop one, but it's not proven yet. So maybe it's Amir or somebody like that later in the year. I don't know, but they need that because their offense is too pedestrian. They need to throw the ball down the field, and Caleb would be one of those guys.
Yeah, we'd love to see them work a vertical pass into the offense at some point. Call me crazy. It's not 1907 anymore. You can throw the ball forward. But before I let you go, I do want to ask a question. It's not necessarily about Caleb Cunningham, but just recruiting at receiver in general, because obviously negative recruiting is a thing. We know that. Everybody's going to do it. And this isn't necessarily a negative, but it's public information that Billy Gonzalez's contract expires after this coming season. So if you're negatively recruiting, or like if I'm Auburn, for example, am I talking to Caleb Cunningham and I'm just like, hey, the guy recruiting you a receiver might not even be there next year. Like his contract's out. Is that a thing is that one of the negative recruiting points they're going to have to deal with?
Does the sun come out each day?
There we go.
That's 100% going to happen. Oftentimes, it really doesn't happen with so much with the coaches, but it's the people around. Your 7-on-7 coach, your high school coach, people looking out for it, like legitimately, you need to pick somebody and a program that's going to have some continuity. Florida, let's just say they're at 12 commitments going into fall camp on August 1st. You and I are just talking it up about the Gators fall camp. Now you're talking recruiting. That 12 could quickly be 5 at the end of September if they started 2-2. You know what I mean? Because like then people start talking. That's just reality. It didn't used to be that way, but kids will quickly turn on a program if they think something's going to go awry, or at least even if they're still publicly committed, they set 3 visits privately with, LSU, Auburn, and Georgia. And,
just saying, Elias Williams. That's
what that was. That did happen. I've heard rumors about that. So if you don't start off good, all of the things we're talking about, yes, they can go right. We can't do anything until we get to the season. So that's why we're having these conversations. Only thing you can do is recruit your butt off and say, we're going to prove it in the season. I mean, what else are you going to say if you're Billy? What else are you going to say if you're Coach Napier? You can't play the games till September. So you just got to recruit hard and say, this is how we're going to use you. We'll show you the best of our ability once the season starts. I mean, you have to fend it off until then. But again, it's still UF, State U, SEC. It's not hard to sell Florida. I'd say that every time I come on your show, and it's not going to change. It's a pretty easy place to recruit to.
Yeah, gonna be really easy to sell Florida to Florida kids if you can actually beat all of the in-state schools. You play all of the Power 5 in-state schools this year.
That's
so
right.
You win those, and no one can say anything about you. Like, no one in state can say a single thing about you. It's like, all right, well, scoreboard. But thank you so much, Brian. This is Brian Smith, Locked On Recruiting Insider. Catch him all throughout the Locked On College channel, and catch him every day with Locked On Seminoles, and every week, Locked On Gators.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Giants Country NFL 33, and I will see you all tomorrow.